The sun beat down mercilessly on the central square of Dry Bend as they positioned me on the worn wooden platform. My hands were shaking, not from the suffocating heat of that March afternoon in 1905, but from the humiliation that burned hotter than any temperature. There I was, Charlotte Hayes, 25 years old, being offered up like merchandise to whoever was willing to pay. Subscribe to the channel and leave a like to get more stories like this. "Look what we have here, gentlemen," the auctioneer shouted, his voice echoing through the crowd that was gathering around the platform. A hard-working, strong woman, capable of taking care of a house with enough energy left over for the fields. The cruel laughter cut through the air like knives. Some women whispered among themselves, pointing at my sturdy body, my wide hips, my waist that never fit the standards of the city ladies. I kept my chin held high, my eyes fixed on the horizon, refusing to show weakness in front of that audience, thirsty for entertainment at the expense of my dignity. "She's got meat on her bones, that's for sure," the auctioneer continued, patting my thigh as if I were cattle. "Perfect for a man who needs someone who can handle the hard work without breaking in the first strong wind." More laughter. My stomach churned, but I remained as still as a statue. I had learned from a young age that showing vulnerability only fed the predators. My mother always said that dignity was the only thing no one could take from you, unless you let them. "Let's start the bidding at $10. Who'll give me $10 for this sturdy specimen?" Silence. The kind of silence that makes your heart stop and the world seem suspended in time. I looked at the faces in the crowd, farmers in dirty hats, merchants in wrinkled suits, even a few curious women who had come to watch the show. No movement, no genuine interest. $5 then. Surely someone needs a dedicated worker. Still nothing. People started to wander off, losing interest when they realized the show wasn't going to be as entertaining as they'd hoped. My throat was as dry as the desert that surrounded our small town, but I held firm, refusing to fall apart in public. $1, come on, gentlemen, a single silver coin. That's when I saw him for the first time. A tall, lean man standing at the back of the crowd, leaning against a wooden post. He wore a faded cowboy hat that shadowed his eyes, but I could feel his gaze fixed on me. Unlike the others, there was no mockery in his posture. There was something else, a stillness, a careful observation that made me uneasy. 60 cents. His voice cut through the air with a quiet authority that made the whole square turn to look at him. 60 cents. The price of a piece of meat at the butcher's. The value that would define my existence in that moment. The auctioneer hesitated, clearly disappointed with the ridiculously low bid, but after a few seconds of total silence, he banged his gavel. "Sold to the gentleman in the back for 60 cents. The man approached the platform with measured steps. Up close, I could see he was about 30, maybe a few years older. His face was weathered by the sun and wind, with lines around his eyes that suggested he smiled, though he wasn't smiling now. There was a deep sadness in his blue eyes, as if he carried an invisible weight on his shoulders. He stepped onto the platform and, to my surprise, didn't touch me right away. Instead, he pulled a knife from his belt and cut the ropes that bound my hands. The gesture was so unexpected that I almost stumbled when my arms were free. "You got a name?" he asked, putting the knife away. "Charlotte," I answered, rubbing my wrists where the ropes had left red marks. "Samuel," he said, briefly touching the brim of his hat. "Samuel Mitchell, I've got a farm about 10 miles from here." Stepped down from the platform together, and I followed him to where his horse was tied. It was a beautiful animal, a dun with white patches on its chest. Samuel untied the reins and offered me his hand to get up on the back. "I don't have another horse," he explained. "Hope you don't mind sharing." I accepted his help, climbing up behind him. As the horse started to move, I had to hold onto his waist to keep my balance. He smelled of leather, clean sweat, and something else, maybe lavender, as if his clothes had been stored with scented sachets. We rode in silence for the first few miles. The landscape around us was typical of the West dry land, low shrubs, distant mountains that seemed to touch the sky. The sun was beginning to set, painting everything in shades of gold and orange. "Can I ask you a question?" I finally said, breaking the silence. "You can." "Why did you buy me?" Samuel took a while to answer. I felt his muscles tense slightly under my hands. Because no one deserves to be up there, treated like an object, he said at last. And because, he hesitated, because I know strength when I see it, and you've got it. His words caught me off guard. I had expected many things, that he would be cruel, that he would exploit me, that he would treat me like the property he had bought. I didn't expect to be seen as strong. What do you expect from me? I asked, deciding to be direct. Honestly, I don't know yet. My farm is small, but it's enough to live on. I have some cattle, horses, a vegetable garden. The house has 2 rooms. One is mine, the other can be yours. It has a lock on the inside, in case you're wondering. I was surprised again. My own room? You're not my slave, Charlotte. You're... He paused, searching for the right words. You're someone who needs a place to start over. And I need company. A partnership, maybe. We're still figuring it out. The farm appeared on the horizon as the sun was low in the sky. It was modest but well kept, a wooden house with a porch, a stable, a chicken coop, a few smaller buildings. Everything was painted white, with blue trim on the windows and doors. There were flowers planted in beds around the house, which surprised me. I didn't expect a lone cowboy to bother with gardens. It was my wife who planted the flowers, Samuel said, as if he'd read my mind. She died 3 winters ago. I keep the garden because she would have liked that. We dismounted in front of the house. Samuel took the horse to the stable while I stood on the porch looking at my new home. The word sounded strange even in my thoughts. Home. How long had it been since I'd had a place to call that? When Samuel returned, he showed me the house. It was simple but comfortable. The main room had a fireplace, a few chairs, a small dining table. The kitchen was well equipped, with a wood-burning stove and shelves full of preserves and supplies. This is your room, he said, opening a door. The room was small but cozy, with a single bed, a dresser, and a window that looked out onto the garden. Like I promised, the lock works. I tested the lock. It really worked. And that's my door, he pointed to the other side of the house. I'll never enter your room without permission. I'll never demand anything you don't want to give. If you decide to leave, you can go at any time. I looked at him, trying to understand his motives. Why are you doing this? Samuel took off his hat and ran a hand through his brown hair. Because I've been judged and rejected too. Maybe not in the same way you have, but I know what it feels like to be invisible, unwanted. He put his hat back on. And because my Sarah always said that the strongest people are the ones who've faced storms and can still stand, Sarah. His dead wife. I was beginning to understand the man who had bought me for 60 cents a little better. That first night, we ate dinner in silence. Samuel had made beans with jerky and bread. It was simple food, but it was good. After dinner, I offered to wash the dishes. You don't have to, he said. I want to help. If I'm going to stay here, I need to contribute somehow. He nodded and went out to see to the animals while I tidied up the kitchen. When I finished, I went to my room and locked the door. I lay down on the narrow bed, still fully dressed, and for the first time in months, I cried. Not from sadness, but from a confused and unexpected relief. The first few days were strange. Samuel would wake up before dawn to take care of the cattle and horses. I took over the care of the house cleaning, cooking, the garden. He never asked. I just started doing it. It was my way of showing gratitude and maybe proving my worth. On the 3rd day, I decided to make biscuits. I found flour, butter, and sugar in the pantry. I wasn't sure if Samuel liked sweets, but I felt the need to create something special, something that was mine. The smell of baking biscuits filled the house. When Samuel came back for lunch, he stopped at the kitchen door, inhaling deeply. Biscuits? He asked, and for the first time, I saw a genuine smile on his face. I hope you like them, I said, taking the baking sheet out of the oven. He took a still warm biscuit and took a bite. He closed his eyes, savoring it. Sarah used to make biscuits, he said softly. Not exactly like these, but thank you, Charlotte. It's been a long time since this house smelled like a home. That afternoon, while I was hanging laundry on the line, I saw Samuel mending a nearby fence. He worked with precise, efficient movements. There was a grace to his actions that contrasted with his quiet, reserved nature. Charlotte, he called out without stopping his work. I need to go to town for supplies tomorrow. Would you like to come? The question caught me off guard. Going back to Dry Bend, where I had been publicly humiliated, was the last thing I wanted to do. I don't need anything from town, I replied. It's not about needing anything. It's about showing that you belong here, that you're not hiding. His words hit me. He was right. Hiding would be letting those people have power over me forever. All right, I said. I'll go with you. The next day, I put on my best dress, the only decent one I had, and accompanied Samuel to town. We rode side by side this time, as he had lent me a gentle mare. The journey was quiet but comfortable. I noticed how Samuel occasionally glanced at me, not with desire or ownership, but with something that seemed like pride? Satisfaction? It was hard to define. Dry Bend seemed smaller in the daylight, less threatening. We tied the horses in front of the general store and went in together. The conversation stopped when they saw me. Some curious glances, others disapproving, but Samuel remained by my side, his presence a silent anchor. "Good morning, Samuel," greeted the shopkeeper, a fat man named Murphy. "And Miss," he hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. "Mrs. Mitchell?" Samuel said firmly, his voice carrying an authority that allowed for no argument. We weren't married, but I understood the message. Samuel was protecting me, giving me status and respectability in the eyes of the community. Murphy swallowed hard and nodded. "Of course, Mrs. Mitchell. What can I get for you?" While Samuel did the shopping, I walked through the aisles of the store, looking at fabrics and supplies. I could feel the stares, hear the whispers, but I didn't care anymore. I had a place to go back to, someone who respected me. That made all the difference. On our way out, a woman approached me. It was Alice Henderson, the local banker's wife, known for her sharp tongue. "So it's true you're living out at Samuel's farm?" she asked, her eyes gleaming with malice. What an interesting arrangement. Before I could answer, Samuel appeared at my side. "Is there a problem with our partnership, Alice?" His voice was calm, but there was steel underneath. "Oh no, of course not," she backed down quickly. "Just making conversation." "Good. Charlotte, let's go." We walked to the horses in silence. As we were mounting, Samuel said, "I'm sorry about that. Some people in this town have too much time on their hands and not enough manners." "Don't be sorry," I replied. "You stood up for me. No one's ever done that before." The ride back home was different. There was a new intimacy between us, an unspoken understanding. Samuel had introduced me as his wife, protected me in public. It was more than anyone had ever done for me. That night, I made a special dinner chicken with potatoes and more biscuits. Samuel praised the food, and we talked more than usual. He told me about his life before Sarah, about how he had built the farm from nothing. I talked about my childhood, about how I had lost my parents young and ended up living from favor to favor until I was sold like property. "Never again," Samuel said when I finished my story. "You'll never again be treated as less than you deserve." His words touched something deep inside me. For the first time in years, I felt like maybe I was worth something, that maybe I deserved respect and kindness. The following weeks established a comfortable routine. I took care of the house and garden. Samuel worked with the cattle and horses. We had dinner together every night, sharing stories and plans for the farm. Slowly, a genuine friendship began to blossom between us. Samuel taught me to ride better, showed me how to care for the horses. In return, I taught him a few recipes my mother had passed down to me. The house began to have life again, and I could see Samuel relaxing, smiling more often. One afternoon, as I was watering Sarah's garden, Samuel came over. "You're taking good care of her flowers," he said, looking at the roses that were beginning to bud. "They're beautiful." Sarah had good taste. She did. He was quiet for a moment. "Charlotte, can I tell you something?" "Of course." "When I saw you on that platform, it wasn't pity I felt. It was recognition. I saw a woman who was being judged for her appearance, not for her heart, and I knew what that was like." "What do you mean?" Samuel took off his hat, running a hand through his hair. "After Sarah died, people looked at me with pity. The single women in town saw me as a charity project. No one saw me as a man, just as a lonely widower who needed to be fixed." I understood perfectly. We had both been reduced to labels, judged by circumstances beyond our control. Thank you, I said, "for seeing me as a person. Thank you for reminding me what it's like to have a real home." That night, after dinner, Samuel asked if I'd like to sit on the porch with him. We brought out chairs and settled side by side. watching the stars. It was a clear, moonless night, and the sky seemed endless. "Charlotte," Samuel said after a long silence, "have you thought about staying permanently?" My heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" "I mean," he hesitated, "this partnership of ours. It's working, for me at least, and I was hoping for you too." "It's working," I admitted, "more than I ever expected." "Then maybe we could make it official. I'm not necessarily talking about marriage, but a real partnership, a legal one, so no one can question your place here." I looked at him in the faint starlight. Samuel had offered me not just a roof over my head, but dignity, respect, a future. And I was starting to feel something more than gratitude for him, something deeper and more dangerous. "I'll think about it," I said, because I didn't have the courage to admit what I really felt. Of course, there's no rush. But there was a rush. Because with every day that passed, I fell a little more in love with the kind man who had bought me for 60 cents and treated me like I was worth millions. 2 months had passed since my arrival at Samuel's farm, and our routine had settled into a carefully choreographed dance. Every morning, I'd wake before sunrise and make strong coffee and fresh bread for him. Samuel would leave to tend to the animals while I organized the house and took care of the garden. We'd have lunch together, and the afternoons were dedicated to repairs on the property or occasional trips to town for supplies. But something was changing between us. I'd find myself watching Samuel when he wasn't looking, the way his muscles moved when he lifted bales of hay, how his eyes lit up when he talked about the horses, how his large, calloused hands could be surprisingly gentle when caring for an injured animal. There were moments when our fingers would touch as we passed dishes during dinner, or when he'd help me down from my horse after a ride, and I'd feel a spark I couldn't ignore. Samuel was different too. I noticed how he lingered in the kitchen after meals, how he made excuses to work near the house when I was in the garden, how his eyes would rest on me when he thought I wasn't paying attention. There was a growing tension in the air, like the electricity before a storm. One Thursday afternoon, while I was hanging clothes on the line, I heard voices approaching. It was a group of women from town, led by Alice Henderson and her sister Margaret. My stomach clenched when I recognized them, the kind of women who thrived on gossip and judgment. "Charlotte," Alice called out with a fake sweetness that didn't fool anyone. "What a surprise to find you here." I kept pinning Samuel's shirts to the line, trying to keep my voice steady. "Good afternoon, Alice. Margaret." "We were just talking about you in town," said Margaret, her small eyes glinting with malice. "What an interesting arrangement you have with poor Samuel." "Arrangement?" I repeated, putting more force than necessary into spreading a shirt. "Well, dear," Alice stepped closer, lowering her voice to a conspiratorial whisper, "we all know what kind of work a woman like you does for a lonely man, especially after what happened at the auction." I felt the blood rush to my head. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Oh, of course you do," Margaret laughed cruelly. "A woman bought for 60 cents? We all know what your real value is. Samuel might be desperate from missing his wife, but even so." "Even so, what?" Samuel's voice cut through the air like a whip. He had appeared out of nowhere, and his expression was darker than I had ever seen it. The women jumped. Alice quickly tried to regain her composure. "Oh, Samuel, we were just paying a social call to your guest." "Guest?" Samuel approached slowly, and there was something dangerous in his movements. "Charlotte is not my guest. She's my partner. And if you have a problem with that, you can take it up with me." "We just think," Margaret began. "I don't care what you think," Samuel interrupted. "This is my property, and Charlotte is welcome here. More welcome than visitors who only come to spread poison." Alice puffed out her chest, indignant. "Well, I can only imagine what kind of influence she's having on you, Samuel Mitchell. Sarah must be turning in her grave to see how you dishonor her memory." That was too far. I saw Samuel's fists clench, and for a moment I feared he would do something he'd regret. But instead, his voice became icy and controlled. "Get off my property. Now." "Samuel, we were just... now." There was no room for negotiation in his voice. The women retreated quickly, muttering to each other like offended hens. When they were out of sight, Samuel turned to me. I was shaking, not from fear, but from a mixture of anger and something else, deep gratitude for having someone defend me. "Are you all right?" he asked, his hands gently touching my arms. "I'm fine," I answered, but my voice betrayed the lie. Samuel sighed and looked in the direction the women had gone. "I'm sorry. Some people in this town, they have small hearts and even smaller minds." "They're not completely wrong," I said, forcing the words out. "I was bought for 60 cents, and I'm living here with you, without a marriage, without—" "Charlotte." Samuel took my face in his hands, forcing me to look at him. "Listen to me very carefully. You weren't bought. You were rescued. And I don't give a damn what those harpies think about our arrangement. What matters is that you're here, that this house has life again, that I have a reason to wake up in the morning beyond just obligation." His blue eyes were intense, and I could see something in them that made my heart race. There was affection there, but also something deeper, more dangerous. "Samuel," I started, but I didn't know how to finish the sentence. He seemed to notice the closeness between us at the same time I did. His hands were still on my face, and I could feel the warmth of his skin, the smell of leather and sun that always accompanied him. For a moment, I thought he was going to kiss me. I wanted him to kiss me, but then he pulled away, letting his hands fall to his sides. "We should get back to work," he said, his voice slightly hoarse. The rest of the afternoon passed in a tense silence. During dinner, we barely spoke. I could feel Samuel's eyes on me, and several times when I looked up, I caught him watching me with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. That night, lying in my bed, I couldn't stop thinking about that moment in the garden. The way Samuel had defended me, how his hands had felt on my face, how for an instant I thought maybe he felt for me what I was starting to feel for him. But there was Sarah. There was always Sarah, her memory hovering over us like a benevolent ghost. How could I compete with a dead woman? How could I hope that Samuel would see me as anything more than a convenience, a way to fill the void his wife had left? The following days were strange. Samuel was more distant, but also more attentive. He brought me wildflowers he found in the fields, fixed the squeaky hinge on my bedroom door without my asking, and praised my cooking more often. It was as if he was trying to tell me something without using words. A week after the women's visit, Samuel announced at breakfast that he needed to travel to the next town to pick up a breeding bull. "I'll be gone for 2 days," he explained. "Will you be all right here alone?" "Of course," I replied, though the thought of being alone on the farm made me slightly nervous. "I can take care of the animals." "I know you can." He hesitated, stirring his coffee. "Charlotte, when I get back, I'd like to talk to you. About us. About what this is becoming." My heart pounded. All right. Samuel left the next morning, and I spent the first day keeping myself busy with extra chores. I cleaned the house from top to bottom, reorganized the pantry, even washed the windows. Anything to keep from thinking about the conversation we would have when he returned. On the second night, a storm rolled in. I could see the lightning on the horizon, and the wind began to howl through the trees around the house. I locked all the animals in the stable and the coop, making sure they were safe, and braced myself for a long night. The rain started around 10 o'clock, first as a drizzle, then as a downpour. Lightning lit up the sky like fireworks, and thunder shook the windows of the house. I was in the kitchen, making tea to calm my nerves, when I heard a sound that made my blood run cold. Crack! The sound of splitting wood, followed by an orange glow that shouldn't have been there. I ran to the window and saw the most terrifying sight of my life. The barn was on fire. A bolt of lightning must have hit the roof. The flames were already spreading quickly, fed by the dry hay stored inside. And then I remembered the horses. Samuel had put 3 horses in the barn that morning because the stable was being repaired. I didn't stop to think. I grabbed a bucket, filled it with water from the kitchen pump, and ran out into the torrential rain. The heat from the flames was intense, even from a distance, and the sound of burning wood was like a demon's roar. "Easy, boy, easy," I muttered to myself as I approached the barn door. I could hear the horses neighing in terror inside, and that only strengthened my resolve. The smoke was suffocating. I soaked my skirt in the rain and pressed it against my nose and mouth, then pushed open the barn door. The heat hit me like a fist, and for a moment I considered turning back. But then I saw thunder. Samuel's favorite stallion, in his stall at the back of the barn, his eyes wide with terror. The fire hadn't reached the horse stalls yet, but it was spreading rapidly across the ceiling. I had minutes, maybe less. I drenched myself completely with the water from the bucket and ran to Thunder first. "Easy, boy," I whispered, my hands trembling as I unlatched his stall. Thunder was panicking, but he knew me well enough to trust me. I managed to get a makeshift rope around his neck and led him out into the rain. 2 horses left. The smoke was getting thicker, and I could feel the heat of the flames getting closer. I ran back in, this time for Bella, the chestnut mare Samuel used for lighter work. She was less cooperative than Thunder, too scared to move easily. I lost precious seconds convincing her to follow me. By the time I finally got her out of the barn, part of the roof began to collapse. Star, the youngest mare, was still in the back stall. I could hear her terrified neighs over the roar of the fire. "One more time," I said to myself, soaked by the rain and shaking from adrenaline and fear. This time was the worst. The fire had spread significantly, and the smoke was so thick I could barely see in front of me. I felt my way to Star's stall, coughing violently. When I finally found her, she was in a total panic, refusing to move. "Please, Star," I begged, my hands trembling as I tried to calm her. "We have to get out of here." That's when I heard it, a deep, ominous groan from the wooden structure above us. The roof was about to come down. There was no time for gentleness. I grabbed the rope with all my strength and pulled Star out of the stall, practically dragging her. She finally understood the urgency and started to move, but time was quickly running out. We made it to the barn door just as a flaming beam fell exactly where we had been seconds before. The impact knocked me to the ground, and for a moment, everything went dark. When I came to, I was outside in the mud, with Star grazing nervously a few feet away. The barn was now completely engulfed in flames, an orange inferno against the dark, stormy sky. I sat up slowly, taking stock of my injuries. My skirt was burned in several places. I had cuts on my arms and hands, and it felt like I had inhaled an entire fire. But I was alive, and more importantly, all 3 horses were safe. I spent the rest of the night on the porch, watching the barn burn until only ashes and charred beams remained. The rain finally put out the last traces of the fire just before dawn. When Samuel got home the next morning, he found me asleep in the porch chair, still in my muddy, burnt clothes from the night before. I woke to the sound of his running footsteps. "Charlotte!" My God, what happened? His eyes moved quickly from what was left of the barn to me, assessing the damage. "Lightning hit the barn during the storm," I explained, my voice hoarse from the smoke. "I managed to get the horses out in time." Samuel was silent for a long moment, looking from the smoldering ruins to me and back again. Then, without warning, he pulled me into his arms in a hug so tight I could barely breathe. "You could have died," he whispered against my hair. "You could have died, and I wasn't even here." "But I didn't," I replied, letting myself melt into his arms. "And the horses are safe." Samuel pulled me away just enough to look at my face, his hands examining the cuts and scrapes. "You risked your life for my horses." "They weren't just your horses," I said softly. "They were our horses. This is my home too, isn't it? At least, I hope it is." Something changed in Samuel's face. The worry gave way to something more intense, deeper. He gently touched a cut on my cheek with his thumb. "Charlotte," he said, his voice low and full of emotion. "What you've become to me, what this has become, I can't pretend it's just a partnership or convenience anymore." My heart stopped. "What do you mean?" "I mean I'm in love with you, completely, irrevocably in love, and seeing you hurt, knowing I almost lost you." He shook his head. "I can't hide it anymore." The words I had dreamed of hearing, but also feared. "And Sarah?" "Sarah was my first love, and I'll always cherish her memory. But you, Charlotte, you are my love now, my future, if you'll have me." I looked at this man who had bought me for 60 cents and treated me like I was worth more than gold. This man who had defended me, protected me, seen me when everyone else looked right through me. This man I loved desperately. "Samuel," I whispered, "I love you too. I've been in love with you for weeks, but I was afraid to admit it, afraid I wasn't enough." He silenced any remaining doubt with a kiss. It was gentle at first, hesitant, as if he still couldn't believe this was really happening. But when I responded, when my hands tangled in his hair, The kiss deepened, filled with weeks of pent-up tension and unexpressed emotion. When we finally broke apart, we were both breathless. "Marry me," Samuel said suddenly. "Not a marriage of convenience, not a business partnership, a real marriage. Because I love you and I want to spend the rest of my life proving it to you every single day." Tears streamed down my face, tears of joy, of relief, of overwhelming love. "Yes," I whispered. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes." Samuel kissed me again, and this time there was no hesitation, no holding back. There was only love, pure and true and finally acknowledged. When we pulled apart, we looked at the remains of the barn together. The destruction seemed smaller now, just wood and nails that could be replaced. "We'll rebuild it," Samuel said, "bigger and better than before." "Together," I agreed, lacing my fingers through his. "Together," he repeated, sealing the promise with another kiss. The fire had destroyed the barn, but it had forged something far more valuable. It had burned away our last defenses and fears, leaving only the naked truth of our love. And from that truth, we would build a future that no storm could ever destroy. In the 2 weeks that followed the barn fire, our lives took a completely new direction. Samuel and I weren't just partners anymore. We were sweethearts, engaged, two hearts that had finally found the courage to come together. The work of rebuilding the barn became our first truly joint project, and every nailed plank, every raised beam represented a brick in the foundation of our shared future. During the day, we worked side by side under the hot sun. Samuel taught me how to use a hammer and saw, and I discovered I had a knack for building. My hands, used to a needle and thread, quickly adapted to the heavier tools. There was something deeply satisfying about creating something tangible with our own hands, in watching the structure grow day by day. "You're a woman of many talents," Samuel said one afternoon, watching me nail a board with precision. "You cook, you garden, you save horses from fires, and you build barns on top of it all." "I'm a quick learner when I have a good teacher," I replied, wiping the sweat from my brow with the back of my hand. It was true. Samuel was patient, explaining each technique carefully, never making me feel incapable or in the way. We worked in perfect harmony, as if we had been doing this together for years. But it wasn't just the days that had changed. The nights now had a new, precious intimacy. We would sit on the porch after dinner, my head resting on Samuel's shoulder, planning not just the rebuilding of the barn, but our entire life ahead. We talked about expanding the house, maybe adding another room. "For visitors," Samuel said, but the blush on his cheeks suggested he was thinking of something more permanent, sweeter. "Charlotte," he said one night, playing with my fingers as we watched the stars, "do you want children?" The question caught me off guard, though I knew it would come eventually. "I do," I answered honestly. "I've always wanted them. What about you?" "Sarah and I tried for years," he said softly. "It never happened. The doctors said maybe it was her, maybe it was me. We never knew for sure." He paused, his fingers tightening around mine. "But with you, I want to try again. I want to build a family with you." My heart filled with a happiness so intense it almost hurt. I would like that very much. Samuel turned to look at me. "Then let's make it official. Tomorrow we'll go to town and speak with Reverend Williams. I don't want another day of uncertainty about our future." "Tomorrow?" I asked, surprised by the urgency. "Why wait? I already know I love you. You know you love me. The rest is just paperwork." His eyes shone with determination. "And the sooner we get married, the sooner we can start our real life." The next morning, we put on our best clothes and rode to town. I wore my only good dress, a navy blue one with pearl buttons, and Samuel had shaved carefully and wore his white shirt saved for special occasions. We looked like a respectable couple, and it gave me confidence. Reverend Williams received us in his small wooden church with surprise, and I have to admit, some hesitation. He was an older man with gray hair and gentle manners, but I could see the concern in his eyes when Samuel explained our request. "Samuel, my son," the Reverend said carefully, "are you sure about this? I mean, I know you and Charlotte have an arrangement, but marriage is a holy sacrament." "Reverend Williams," Samuel said firmly, "Charlotte is not an arrangement. She is the woman I love, the woman I want as my wife. If there is anyone more worthy of the sacrament of marriage than her, I'd like to meet them." The Reverend looked at me, sizing me up. "And you, my child?" Are you certain this is your wish and not just gratitude? The question irritated me, but I kept my voice calm. Reverend, I know the difference between gratitude and love. I love Samuel Mitchell with all my heart, and I would be honored to be his wife. Something in my voice must have convinced him, because the Reverend nodded slowly. Very well. When would you like to have the ceremony? Today, Samuel said without hesitation. Now, if possible. Today? But Samuel, don't you have family you'd like to invite? And Charlotte, surely there are people. We don't have anyone but each other. I interrupted gently, and that's all we need. The Reverend hesitated again, but then he sighed. Very well, you will need witnesses. I can ask the blacksmith and his wife. An hour later, I stood at the altar of that small church, hands clasped with Samuel's, promising to love, honor, and cherish him until death did us part. The words came from my heart with ease, because they were true. When Samuel repeated the same vows to me, his voice steady and clear, I felt as if my soul had finally found its place in the world. You may kiss the bride, said Reverend Williams, and Samuel needed no further encouragement. The kiss was sweet and full of promise, sealing not just our legal union, but our commitment of the heart. When we parted, we were husband and wife, Mr. and Mrs. Mitchell. The blacksmith, a sturdy man named Tom Brady, congratulated us warmly. Congratulations, Samuel. You've picked a good woman. His wife, Mary, was more cautious but polite. I wish you happiness, she said, though I could tell she had reservations. I didn't care. I had Samuel. I had our love. I had a bright future ahead of me. What else mattered? We rode back home as husband and wife, and the farm had never looked so beautiful. It was truly ours now, our shared home, the place where we would build our life together. That night, we ate dinner in the kitchen as always, but everything was different. I was Mrs. Charlotte Mitchell now, and Samuel was my real husband. After dinner, he took my hand and led me to his room, our room now. Are you sure? He asked softly, though his eyes made it clear how much he desired me. I'm sure of everything that involves you, I replied, and it was the purest truth I had ever spoken. Our wedding night was everything I had ever dreamed of and more. Samuel was gentle, patient, loving me with a tenderness that brought tears to my eyes. For the first time in my life, I felt truly beautiful, truly desired, truly loved. In my husband's arms, I found a happiness I didn't even know was possible. The following weeks established our new routine as a married couple. We slept together, woke together, worked together, planned together. The barn was almost finished, and every day brought new signs that our life was blossoming. But not everything was perfect. The town of Dry Bend had not taken the news of our marriage well. The gossip spread like wildfire, and I could feel the stares and whispers whenever we went to town for supplies. One afternoon, 3 weeks after our wedding, the queasiness I had been feeling in the mornings finally made sense. I was late, and my breasts were tender. With a racing heart, I counted the days again. There was no doubt I was expecting a baby. The news left me simultaneously thrilled and terrified. Samuel had mentioned that he and Sarah had never been able to have children. What if there was something wrong with me? What if I lost the baby? What if I wasn't a good mother? I kept the news to myself for a few days, wanting to be sure before telling Samuel. But he knew me too well not to notice the changes. Are you all right? He asked at breakfast one Thursday, noticing I had only picked at my food. You've been strange this week. I'm fine, I lied, but my voice didn't even convince me. Samuel stood up and came to kneel beside my chair. Charlotte, we're married now. There are no secrets between us. What's going on? I looked into his worried blue eyes and knew I couldn't hide it any longer. Samuel, I think I'm expecting a baby. The silence that followed was deafening. Samuel became completely still, as if he had turned to stone. For a terrible moment, I thought he was disappointed, that maybe he didn't want children with me after all. Then his face lit up with the purest joy I had ever seen. A baby? He whispered, his hands instinctively going to my still flat stomach. Our baby? Our baby, I confirmed, tears of relief and happiness streaming down my face. Samuel pulled me into his arms and swung me around the kitchen, both of us laughing and crying at the same time. I can't believe it, he said, setting me gently on the floor. After all these years, we're going to have a child. Are you happy? I asked, still needing confirmation. Happy? Charlotte? I'm the happiest man who ever walked this earth. He kissed my forehead, my cheeks, my lips. You've given me so much love, a home, a purpose, and now you give me this too. That afternoon, Samuel insisted I sit while he finished the last details on the barn. You need to rest now, he said protectively. You're carrying our future. I'm not an invalid, I protested. A pregnancy doesn't make me fragile. I know that, but let me take care of you. Let me spoil you a little. How could I deny him that? I sat on the porch, sewing tiny baby clothes as I watched my husband work. Life was so good, it almost felt unreal. But reality came crashing back a few weeks later when we decided to go to town for supplies and to announce our pregnancy. Samuel was beaming with pride, barely able to contain the news. We were leaving the general store when we ran into Alice Henderson and a group of her friends. Alice's malicious smile told me immediately that trouble was coming. Well, well, she said loud enough for everyone on the street to hear. If it isn't the newlyweds, what a quick wedding that was, don't you think? Almost as if there was an urgency. I felt the blood rush to my face. Good day, Alice. Have you heard the news, girls? Alice continued, her voice dripping with poison. Apparently Samuel's wife is expecting. What interesting timing, considering when they got married. The implication was clear and completely false. Our baby had been conceived after our wedding, but Alice was planting seeds of doubt, suggesting I had forced Samuel into marriage because I was pregnant with another man's child. Alice, Samuel's voice was low and dangerous. I suggest you choose your next words very carefully. Oh, Samuel, I'm not suggesting anything, Alice laughed cruelly. Just commenting on interesting coincidences. After all, we all know what kind of woman you acquired at the auction. That was too far. Samuel took a step forward, and for the first time since I'd known him, I saw true rage in his eyes. Listen carefully, Alice Henderson, and make sure your friends are listening too. Charlotte is my wife, an honorable and respectable woman. Our child was conceived in love within our marriage. If I hear you or anyone else implying otherwise, there will be consequences. Threats now? Alice puffed out her chest. How low you've fallen, Samuel Mitchell. It's not a threat, it's a promise. Samuel took my hand firmly. My family deserves respect, and I'll make sure they get it. We started to walk away, but Alice wasn't finished. Your poor Sarah must be turning in her grave, seeing how you've dishonored her memory with this. Samuel stopped abruptly and turned around. Before anyone could react, he took 2 quick steps back and stood face to face with Alice. Finish that sentence. His voice was as cold as winter. I dare you to finish that sentence. Alice paled, finally realizing she had gone too far. I was just... Sarah was my first wife, and I will always honor her. But Charlotte is my wife now, the mother of my child, and the woman I love. If you or anyone in this town has a problem with that, you can deal with me directly. The silence on the street was total. Everyone was watching, waiting to see how the situation would play out. Samuel was clearly prepared to physically defend my honor if necessary, and Alice finally realized she had poked the wrong man. There's no need for violence, she muttered, backing away. Then there will be no more disrespect, Samuel said firmly, to me or to my family. We walked to our horses in silence, but I could feel all eyes on us. As we were mounting, Samuel looked at me with concern. I'm sorry you had to go through that. Don't be, I responded, surprising him with my firmness. Samuel, you defended me. You stood there in front of the whole town, and you defended me. No one has ever done that for me. I always will, he said simply. You're my wife, my family. Protecting you is my responsibility and my pleasure. We rode home in a comfortable silence. The confrontation had been unpleasant, but it had also clarified something important. Samuel and I were a unit now, a family. The world could try to tear us apart or diminish us, but it wouldn't succeed. We had found something real and precious in each other, something worth more than the approval of a small, prejudiced town. That night, lying in bed, my head on Samuel's chest, we talked about the future. Maybe we should consider moving. He said thoughtfully, find a place where we can start fresh, where our child can grow up without carrying the weight of other people's prejudices. Or, I said calmly, we could stay and show everyone what kind of family we are, what kind of love we have. Who knows, maybe we'll change a few minds along the way. Samuel chuckled softly, his fingers playing with my hair. My brave warrior. You're right, as always. This is our home. We're not going to let gossips run us out of it. Besides, I added with a smile, someone needs to set an example for our children on how to face adversity. Children? Samuel propped himself up on his elbow to look at me. How many are you planning on? As many as you want, I answered honestly. This house is big. Our farm is prosperous, and our love is strong enough for a dozen children. Samuel kissed me deeply. I love you so much, Charlotte Mitchell. I love you too, Samuel Mitchell. Forever. 6 months later, our first child was born, a strong, healthy boy we named David, after the king who faced giants. Samuel cried when he held him for the first time, his tears falling on our baby's perfect little face. He's perfect, he whispered. Absolutely perfect. The town of Dry Bend gradually came to accept our family. Not everyone, and not immediately, but over time. Our love was too obvious, our happiness too genuine to be denied forever. Samuel became one of the most respected ranchers in the region, and I established myself as a capable and dignified woman. We had 4 more children in the following years, 2 girls and 2 boys. Our house filled with laughter, our farm prospered, and our love only grew stronger with each passing year. Sometimes when I'm on the porch watching Samuel play with our children in the garden we now tend together, I think about that terrible day at the auction. I think about the woman I was then, lost, rejected, worthless, in the eyes of the world. And then I look at the woman I've become, loved, respected, a mother, a wife, the mistress of a thriving home. Samuel bought me for 60 cents, but he gave me a love that is priceless. He saw something in me that no one else could see, and he helped me see it too. Together we built something beautiful and lasting, proving that a person's true worth isn't found in the opinions of others, but in the love we are able to give and receive. Subscribe to the channel and leave a like to get more stories like this. Our story began with humiliation and despair, but it became a testament to the transformative power of true love. And every day, I am grateful that I was bought by that kind cowboy who had the eyes to see the love no one else could.